When a reporter tried to humiliate Melania Trump, Barron's calm but cutting words turned the tables in the most unbelievable way. The Metropolitan Museum of Art gleamed with an opulent glow, its iconic facade illuminated against the crisp New York night. Inside, the grand hall was alive with the hum of conversation, laughter, and the clinking of crystal glasses. The event was a charity gala, the kind that drew the who's who of politics, business, and entertainment. The air was thick with a blend of sophistication and anticipation, as though the attendees sensed that tonight would be anything but ordinary. Guests dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits mingled beneath the soaring ceilings, their polished appearances masking the undercurrents of whispered gossip. Waiters moved like shadows, balancing trays of champagne and artfully arranged hors d'oeuvres. At the center of it all stood Melania Trump, a vision of elegance in a black gown that flowed like liquid midnight. Her diamond earrings caught the light with every graceful movement, but it was her poise that truly turned heads. She navigated the room with practiced ease, offering polite smiles and quiet exchanges, her demeanor as impenetrable as a fortress. Nearby, her son, Barron Trump, cut an imposing figure. At 19, he had grown into a tall and striking young man, his reserved nature lending him an air of quiet strength. While Melania engaged with donors and event organizers, Barron stayed close, his sharp eyes scanning the room. He was protective of his mother, especially in environments like this one, where every glance, every whisper, felt like an evaluation. Unbeknownst to them, a storm was brewing in the form of Jenna Lyons. The journalist, known for her biting critiques and no-holds-barred interviews, was already weaving through the crowd. With her cameraman in tow, she carried an unmistakable air of determination. Tonight wasn't just about reporting on the event. Jenna had a mission: to provoke, to challenge, and, most importantly, to create headlines. Her target was clear, and her questions were razor-sharp, crafted to pierce through any veneer of composure. The gala continued as planned, with speeches and performances adding to the evening's refined atmosphere. Guests moved from one conversation to another, their laughter echoing softly in the vast space. Melania stood near the stage, engaged in a discussion with the event's organizer about the evening's proceeds. Her focus was on the cause, providing resources for underprivileged children, a topic that had always been close to her heart. Barron, stationed a few steps behind her, caught sight of Jenna out of the corner of his eye. The journalist moved with purpose, her microphone poised like a weapon. Barron's jaw tightened. He had seen enough interviews and headlines to recognize the telltale signs of an ambush. Jenna's cameraman adjusted his equipment, positioning himself for the perfect shot. Jenna stopped just a few feet away, her presence interrupting the natural flow of the room. The soft buzz of conversation began to falter as nearby guests noticed her approach. She smiled tightly, her eyes fixed on Melania. "Mrs. Trump," she began, her voice cutting through the ambient noise with practiced precision. Melania turned to face her, her expression calm but guarded. "Good evening," she replied politely, though the slight narrowing of her eyes betrayed her wariness. Jenna wasted no time. "Many critics argue that your silence during your time as First Lady contributed to division in this country. How do you respond to those who feel you prioritized loyalty over leadership?" The question hung in the air, sharp and provocative. Conversations nearby came to an abrupt halt as heads turned toward the scene. Even the music seemed to dim, as though the room itself held its breath. Barron stepped closer, his protective instincts flaring. He could see the tension in his mother's posture, the careful way she composed herself before speaking. "Good journalism often requires asking difficult questions," Jenna pressed, her tone laced with a veneer of professionalism. But silence, Mrs. Trump, can be as telling as any statement. Do you think your silence contributed to the controversies surrounding your husband's administration? Melania opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, Barron stepped forward, placing himself between his mother and the journalist. His voice, calm but firm, broke the tension. Excuse me, but is this really the appropriate time or place for these questions? The room seemed to hold its collective breath as Barron Trump's voice echoed across the space. Conversations ceased entirely, and all eyes turned toward the young man who had stepped forward with the composure of someone far beyond his years. At nearly 6.5 feet tall, Barron towered over Jenna Lyons, but it wasn't his height that commanded attention. It was the quiet authority in his tone. Jenna, momentarily taken aback, quickly regained her footing. Her practiced smirk returned as she shifted her focus from Melania to Barron. "I understand your concern, Barron," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "but these are questions the public deserves answers to." Barron's expression didn't waver. "The public deserves respect," he replied evenly. "And this event is about supporting children in need, not scoring political points. If you were genuinely interested in understanding my mother's perspective, you would have requested an interview instead of ambushing her here." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder, a ripple of approval spreading among the guests. Jenna's smirk faltered, and her gaze darted around the room as if searching for an ally. Instead, she found faces watching Barron with growing admiration. Undeterred, Jenna pressed on. "Your mother's silence during critical moments has been widely criticized. Don't you think addressing these concerns could provide much-needed clarity?" Barron's voice rose slightly, just enough to command attention without sounding aggressive. "Silence isn't always a weakness," he said. "Sometimes it's a sign of dignity, of choosing reflection over reaction. My mother's actions, her work to help children and advocate for kindness, speak louder than any headline you're trying to create tonight." The ripple of approval turned into scattered applause. A man in the front row nodded appreciatively, while a woman near the buffet whispered to her companion, "He's more composed than most politicians I've seen." Jenna glanced at her cameraman, who continued filming, capturing every word. She knew the footage was gold, but she also knew she was losing control of the narrative. Desperation crept into her voice as she tried one last time to regain the upper hand. "With all due respect, Barron," she said, her tone sharper now, "isn't it fair to say that silence can also be complicit? Doesn't your mother's refusal to address controversies suggest agreement with them?" Barron took a step closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over Jenna. His expression remained calm, but there was an unmistakable steel in his eyes. "You're confusing silence with passivity," he said. "My mother has faced relentless criticism, yet she's never stooped to yelling or finger-pointing. That takes strength, not weakness. Maybe if you listened instead of provoking, you'd understand that." The room erupted into applause, this time louder and more unified. Some guests even began cheering. Jenna's face reddened, and she took a small step back, clearly unsettled by the young man's poise and the crowd's reaction. Melania, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, placed a gentle hand on Barron's shoulder. Her touch was subtle, but it spoke volumes. She didn't need to say a word. Her son had already spoken for her, and he had done so with grace and conviction. Jenna attempted a weak smile, though it was clear she had lost the moment. "Well, Barron," she said, her tone now bordering on strained, "you certainly have a way with words. Perhaps we'll see more of you in the public eye someday." Barron didn't respond, his gaze steady and unwavering. It was a silent dismissal, one that left Jenna scrambling to save face. She nodded curtly to her cameraman, signaling him to stop recording, and turned on her heel. The confrontation was over, but the impact of Barron's words lingered in the room. The applause swelled again, and several guests approached Melania and Barron with words of admiration. "You handled that brilliantly," one man said, shaking Barron's hand. "Your mother must be so proud." Melania offered a small, gracious smile, her usual reserve softened by a glimmer of pride. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice filled with sincerity. As the night carried on, the buzz around Barron's confrontation with Jenna Lyons didn't fade. Guests gathered in small clusters, replaying the exchange in their minds and sharing their admiration for his poise. The event's purpose, the charity's mission, soon became intertwined with the unexpected moment of clarity and grace from a young man who had been thrust into the spotlight. By the time Melania and Barron exited the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the moment had already begun spreading online. Guests who had recorded snippets of the confrontation shared them on social media, and within hours, the clips had gone viral. Hashtags like Fiend Barron Speaks, Poised Under Pressure, and Respect Matters trended globally. Some tweets praised Barron's eloquence. Barron Trump just gave a masterclass in handling the media. Composed, respectful, and firm. Bravo! Who knew the youngest Trump would be the one to deliver such a powerful message? Silence is not weakness. Barron speaks. Others took aim at Jenna Lyons, criticizing her tactics. Ambushing someone at a charity event? Really, Jenna? You got what you deserved. Respect matters. The media needs to learn there's a time and place. Tonight wasn't it. Barron showed more maturity than the so-called journalist. Media coverage, the world takes notice. The following morning, the confrontation dominated headlines. News outlets played clips of Barron's measured response on repeat, dissecting his every word. Pundits debated the ethics of Jenna's approach and lauded Barron's unexpected eloquence. Barron Trump defended his mother with the grace and wisdom of someone far beyond his years, said one commentator on a popular morning show. This wasn't just a defense of Melania Trump. It was a broader call for civility and respect. Not all the coverage was favorable, of course. Certain outlets framed the moment as another example of the Trump family using confrontation to deflect criticism. However, the overwhelming sentiment leaned in Barron's favor, with many praising his ability to handle the situation with dignity. Victoria Kane, a rival journalist and longtime critic of Jenna Lyons, even tweeted, "Barron Trump handled that moment with more poise than most adults could. There's a lesson here for all of us. Respect matters, even in disagreement." The charity's social media accounts also saw a surge in engagement. Donations skyrocketed as people rallied behind the cause that had been overshadowed by the drama. Barron's message about focusing on the event's purpose resonated with many, sparking a broader conversation about the role of media in high-profile spaces. Personal reflection. A moment at home. Later that evening, back at their home in Palm Beach, Melania and Barron sat together in the living room. The house was quiet, the buzz of the day left behind, but the glow of the event's aftermath lingered. Barron scrolled through his phone, skimming through the flood of messages and posts about the night. While he appreciated the support, he felt a pang of discomfort at being the center of attention. It wasn't about him, he thought. It had been about standing up for his mother. "You didn't have to do that," Melania said softly, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but there was a note of vulnerability that caught Barron's attention. "I'm used to it. I've been handling these situations for years. Barron set his phone down and met her gaze. I know, Mom, but it doesn't make it right. You've done so much for so many people, and they need to see that. They need to see you for who you really are. Melania's eyes glistened, though she quickly blinked the tears away. She reached out and placed a hand on his arm. Thank you, she said simply. But the weight of those words filled the room like a warm embrace. Cultural impact. A broader conversation. The days that followed saw a ripple effect from the confrontation. Talk shows and podcasts discussed the ethics of media ambushes, with many citing Jenna Lyons' actions as a lesson in what not to do. Some commentators framed the moment as a broader commentary on the importance of respect, especially in an era where sensationalism often overshadowed substance. Barron's words, particularly his emphasis on listening and focusing on actions rather than provocation, struck a chord with people from all walks of life. Teachers shared clips of his speech with their students as an example of respectful discourse. Parents praised him for setting an example for young people. The viral moment also reignited discussions about the humanity behind public figures. We often forget, one op-ed read, that public figures like Melania Trump are more than their titles or headlines. They are parents, children, and human beings navigating an unforgiving world. Barron's response reminded us of that simple truth. As the news cycle progressed, the confrontation evolved into more than just a viral moment. It became a symbol of the growing demand for civility in public discourse. On college campuses, professors held debates about the role of the media in high-stakes situations. Was Jenna Lyons' ambush a legitimate act of journalism, or did it cross an ethical line? Students explored the balance between the public's right to know and the respect owed to individuals, even public figures. The phrase, "silence isn't weakness," trended across multiple platforms, adopted by advocacy groups and motivational speakers alike. It became a rallying cry for those who believed in choosing dignity over reaction, reflection over chaos. Barron's ability to stand firm without losing his temper resonated deeply. A leadership coach on a popular podcast said, Barron Trump's response was a masterclass in emotional intelligence. He didn't just defend his mother, he demonstrated how to diffuse tension and shift the narrative without resorting to aggression. The charity that had hosted the event also saw a significant boost in visibility. Donations poured in from individuals inspired by the message of focusing on the bigger picture. The organization used the momentum to launch new initiatives, crediting Barron's words for sparking renewed interest in their mission. Jenna Lyons faces the fallout. While Barron and Melania returned to their lives with dignity, Jenna Lyons faced a more complicated aftermath. Her network released a statement defending her journalistic approach, but acknowledged the backlash. Journalism often requires asking uncomfortable questions, the statement read. However, we understand the concerns raised about timing and context. Critics from both sides of the political spectrum called her out. There's a time and place for tough questions, wrote a prominent commentator. A charity gala, isn't it? Even her colleagues began to distance themselves. On a rival news program, a panel of journalists dissected her actions. What Jenna did wasn't journalism, one said. It was a stunt. Jenna herself remained silent for several days, her social media accounts eerily quiet. When she finally addressed the incident, her response was measured but unapologetic. I asked questions the public has been wanting answers to, she said during an interview. I stand by my intent, but perhaps my timing could have been better. The damage, however, had been done. Her reputation as a relentless journalist now carried the stain of overreach, and her ratings took a noticeable dip. Barron's reflection. Growth in the spotlight. Barron, meanwhile, found himself navigating the aftermath with a mix of humility and introspection. Though he was praised for his composure, he remained wary of the spotlight. For him, the moment had never been about public recognition. It had been about protecting his mother and standing up for what he believed was right. In the weeks following the event, he returned to his studies and hobbies, avoiding interviews and declining offers to appear on talk shows. Despite the attention, he managed to maintain his private life, a testament to his discipline and grounded nature. Still, the experience left an impression on him. In a quiet moment during a family dinner, Melania said, "You handled yourself well, Barron. Not everyone could have done what you did." Barron smiled faintly, his eyes thoughtful. "I just said what needed to be said," he replied. "But it made me realize something. Sometimes, standing up for what's right isn't about being loud. It's about being clear." His words became a defining principle for him moving forward. He began to take a more active interest in the causes his mother supported, joining her at events and even contributing ideas for new initiatives. Though he remained out of the limelight, those who knew him saw a young man quietly stepping into his own. A legacy of respect. Months after the gala, the viral moment still lingered in public memory. Clips of Barron's exchange with Jenna continued to circulate, often accompanied by captions like, "A lesson in grace under fire," or "The power of quiet strength." Melania, too, felt the ripple effects. Public perception of her shifted slightly, as people began to view her not just as a former First Lady, but as a mother whose bond with her son reflected a deeper humanity. For her, the moment was a reminder of the values she had instilled in Barron, values of respect, loyalty, and courage. The incident also sparked changes in how similar events were covered. Journalists, wary of the backlash Jenna had faced, approached high-profile figures with greater sensitivity, ensuring their questions were more appropriate to the context. In the Trump household, the moment became a cherished memory, not because of the attention it brought, but because of what it represented, a testament to family, integrity, and the strength that comes from standing together.